Hello, everyone, and welcome to the What's Your Everest podcast. My name is Liam Hubbard. I'm an intern here at Evereststrong Coaching, and today I'm co hosting with Dr. Carla Steingraber, who is the head of Evereststrong Coaching, and we are absolutely thrilled and very grateful to be able to welcome Emma Schwerin to the show today. So, just a bit of some bios for our viewers and listeners out there. Carla is a certified mental game coach and licensed clinical and sports psychologist who has been in practice for nearly 20 years now, working with athletes. Emma is a climber, to say the very, very least. Emma is an incredibly skilled athlete, both mentally and physically. She is the youngest woman ever to do the complete the 7 summits and the youngest American woman to summit Mount Everest. So normally our "What's your Everest" is kind of metaphorical, but it's literal here today, and we have a really exciting conversation to dive into about her journey, how she applies different mental strategies and what communication and relationships look like as you're preparing for that type of endeavor. So, Emma, thanks again.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Well, Emma, tell us a little bit about when you first realized that mountaineering was actually something that you wanted to pursue more seriously.
Yeah, so I lived in Montana for most of my life, which is very outdoorsy and has lots of mountains. And so I've always been an outdoorsy kid, but I actually didn't like hiking when I grew up. And so my introduction to mountaineering was a little different. But I was in my eighth grade English class and we watched a documentary on Mount Everest. And I saw someone crossing a ladder in the ice fall. And I remember thinking, like, wow, that just looks amazing. And I have to do something like that. So then I told my dad about it and we ended up doing a trek to Everest Base Camp. And then after that, I was like, okay, I need to do some more of this.
It's amazing that your parents were so supportive right away.
Yeah. Yeah, I told my dad about it and he said, "Yeah, let's do it." And the next day we had booked a trip to go to Everest Base Camp.
That's
So,
incredible. Yeah.
That's awesome.
What do you think drew you to Everest and the idea of the 7 summits already at such a young age?
yeah, so after we did our trek, we went and did a little mountaineering prep course in Bolivia and we were supposed to summit 3 mountains there and we didn't summit any mountains. So, and then for some reason we came out of that thinking, "Yep, let's do the 7 summits." So, um, I think that what drew me to it was just how big of a challenge it is. And I mean, I love challenges. I was raised in a family of people who love challenges. And so I think that's what really drew me to it was the challenge and the risk and the excitement in that.
Wow. Were there role models, mentors, or life experiences that really shaped your mindset in that regard?
I mean, mostly my parents. I grew up with both my parents kind of showing me that you can do anything you set your mind to. And my dad would tell me probably at least once a day, if you think it, you can do it. So I was hearing that pretty much every day, and I was remember my brother and I would just roll our eyes and be like, "Okay, dad, like sure, whatever you say." But then somehow I have also grown to believe it as well. So I mean, my dad always believed in me and encouraged me from the beginning. Once I said I was going to do the 7 summits, I mean, he not only is did them all with me, but he also believed in me that I could do them myself as well, which was something that really was important to me because I was just a little girl saying I was going to do this really crazy thing. And not many people, not many parents would go with that. So that definitely had a big impact on everything that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that, did you ever face doubts from other people about your goals? And if so, how did you handle that?
Yeah, I definitely had a lot of doubts from outside people. I think everyone in my family was very supportive, especially my dad. But when I would show up for a climb, I definitely felt this impression that everyone already had these expectations for me, that I was going to be the weak link and that I was going to be the person holding everyone back in the group climbs. And of course, that was never true, and I always excelled, but it was really hard for me, and it was something I really had to learn to deal with, that other people were doubting me and didn't even know who I was yet. So,
Mhm. And did
Yeah.
those doubts come explicitly or more of an implied thing, or was it a mix? How were you sort of made aware of that?
yeah, it was definitely a mix. I mean, part of it was just that I could tell that people had that impression of me, and then other people would just say it flat out, which, was definitely something I had never dealt with before,
Wow.
and yeah, I mean, when I was in I think I was on my 5th of the 7 no, I was on my 6th of the 7 summits. I'd done 6 of them, I only had Everest left, and someone in my team said to me, like, "I'm double your age, and so everything you've done, I've already done it, and everything you know, I already know." And I was like, "Well, that's really interesting."
Wow.
Um, yeah, and then I had people who just had biases that they weren't aware of, especially I mean, most of it was early on in my climbing experience, but on the later end as well, especially when we climbed Everest, and then my dad would tell people, "Oh, we just climbed Everest." And the person, whoever he was talking to, would immediately go, "Oh, congratulations, sir." And like, "That's great, sir." And I was standing right there and I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting." Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so I mean, it was things like that. And it got easier pretty much it got easier the further on in my journey, because then I actually had things that I could say for myself, especially after Denali. After I climbed Denali, I was like, that is a big thing in my record that will help me. So,
Right. That makes sense.
Huge.
yeah.
Did people start to had they already then heard of your reputation by then?
I would say after Denali is when that started, but
Yeah.
it was yeah, as much negative things I had so much more positive stuff. I had tons of people supporting me, and I had people that I didn't even know supporting me. When I got to Everest, I met all the people I was climbing with, and half of them had told me like, "Oh, we've been following your journey, and like that's so
Mm.
cool, and we're so happy for you." And so that was really special to me to hear that I had people who I didn't even know who knew about my journey, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your typical training regimen looking like leading up to Denali? Because I know that's one type of mountain, and then leading up to Everest, which is very different.
Yeah, I mean, the training for Denali versus Everest were so, so different, because Denali is self-supported, which basically means that all of your gear and group gear you have to carry yourself, which is different on most mountains. But I was carrying for myself all my group gear plus a bit of other people's gear was 120 pounds, and that was
Oh,
pretty much as I was. And so that was pretty crazy for me. And so to train for that, because when you carry it on the mountain, you have it split between your backpack and then your sled. So you're pulling it and carrying it at the same time,
wow.
which is a motion that I wasn't used to. Of course, I don't regularly pull things around. So that was part of the
Your
training.
school
That was
backpack isn't 60 pounds?
no, not typically. And so it was a lot of um, max strength for Denali versus something like Everest is a lot more endurance. And so for Denali, I would have to pull a tire around my high school campus, which I don't recommend, and was not the most fun thing. And I would have to go on the Stairmaster with a giant backpack with weight in it for 4 hours sometimes. So that was really intense. Versus for Everest, I would do something like 900 squats with 5 pounds. So it's a lot more just a little bit of weight, but for a long time. So
Wow. Yeah. How did you
very
mentally
intense.
prepare for that? I mean, there are these extreme conditions, there are unknown challenges, but also there's just even in the training, like 4 hours on the Stairmaster is mentally grueling. And I think you had told me you wouldn't allow yourself to watch any movies, which I'm impressed by that.
Yeah, I mean the physical training was 6 days a week, anywhere from 1 to 5 hours a day, for 2 years. And so while that was really important, and even the time itself, it seems so huge, the mental side for me was almost more important, because when you physically are doing something. For me, like, I get tired and my mind can convince me that I'm too tired to keep going. Well, in fact, like, I could keep going for a
Mhm.
lot longer. But I, especially early on, had an issue with my mind saying, "Oh, but like, why would I run right now when I could walk?" That just in the training. But then, yeah, so I wouldn't watch movies. The most I would do was let myself listen to a bit of music, but you can't listen to music on the mountain, so that was pushing it sometimes.
Mm.
But I would really try and train my mind in those just at school in my normal training more so that when I was on the mountain, it wasn't that hard for me anymore. Of course, I mean, on the mountain, things are always harder than they actually are. But
More interesting than a stairmaster, though.
yeah, so the Stairmaster was so much more boring than the actual mountaineering, which was part of the mental battle with that.
Yeah.
Um, but when I actually got on the mountain, it wasn't especially on Everest. At Everest, I was so physically prepared. I had so many mental mountains that I had gone through before I even got to Everest. So Everest was nice because it felt like it was kind of putting all of my hard work not only in the training but also on the other mountains, just kind of to a summary. Um, but for those mental things on the mountain, I did a lot of visualization.
Mm.
My coach, who is just amazing, she would film kind of voice recordings for me because she had already done all the 7 summits, and so she knew what I was going to be doing. And so she would record a voice recording of a scene on the mountain somewhere of some situation, and I would listen to it. And then she did a lot of breathing exercises with me. I did journal. I mean, I think it was important for my mental health to journal, but also just for memory. But yeah, I
Yeah.
journaled every mountain, and that was helpful. Sometimes I had so much going on, but I didn't really want to talk about it, and so the journaling was really helpful, especially because
Mhm.
um not it's hard to explain the things that are happening on the mountain. My friends are super supportive, but if I'm telling them about all this crazy stuff that's happening on the mountain, they don't necessarily relate to that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah.
What about the hardest days of training? What were those things that kept you from giving up or walking instead of running?
Yeah, I mean, the hardest days of training, I would always tell my trainer. I had a Zoom with my trainer once a week. And she would always ask, how's your training going? And I would always tell her the hardest part about my training is the 5-minute walk from my dorm to the gym.
Oh, yeah.
And that's like the hardest part for me. And
Mhm.
so I mean, once I was in the training and once I was going, normally I was able to do it really well and focus. But the hardest parts were probably pulling the tire, not because it was physically hard, but because people would come up to me and ask what I was doing.
Are
And
you
I was
okay?
always, yeah, we had a lot of construction at the time, and the construction workers would come up to me and ask if I needed help. And I would always say, no, I'm trying to do this. Like, I'm doing this on purpose. Um, but yeah, so that was hard for me just like socially. But the running was hard for me because like I said, I'd be running and then I'd be like, but I could walk right now. And then I would convince
Yeah.
myself, okay, well maybe I'll walk. So what I ended up doing is I got a friend to do it with me. And then
Oh,
running with a
wow.
peer is so much easier. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really true.
and we actually would come up with a routine. We would do my long runs on Sundays, and then we would go to our favorite cafe afterwards. And instead of treating it like a run, we would treat it like a like how's your life going and what's the drama? And so we would just talk about everything that was happening in our lives and all the crazy stuff that was happening at school. And then we would go have our favorite cafe lunch, and so that was
Nice.
very helpful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Were there other unexpected challenges during the planning stage that you had to problem solve?
Yeah, actually, I was working so hard that I would get sick a lot,
Mm.
because I really had no time. I mean, I was doing school, and then right after school, I would go do my training, and then once training was over, I would do my homework, and then I would repeat. And so that was really hard for me because my body was just working so hard that I would get sick,
Extreme, yeah.
which stressed me out a lot because if I'm sick, I can't train, and if I can't train, then I won't be prepared. Um, and my stress and nervousness was always so much worse before I actually got to the mountain. So once I got to the mountain, then I was fine. Similar to the gym thing. Once I got
Yeah.
there, I was okay, and especially for the climbing, once I was in the airport even, there was nothing more I could do, and I was gonna try my hardest, and I was gonna give it all my all, but there's nothing else I could do to prepare. And so the preparing beforehand was more stressful for me normally than the actual mountain.
Mm.
And so then getting sick was really hard for me because then I couldn't be training and I couldn't be doing anything, and it would just leave me to stress more about not training. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that was really difficult, especially I did this whole thing with school, and so one of the mountains I was Aconcagua, the tallest mountain in South America, and then Vinson, which is the tallest mountain in Antarctica, and we did those two back to back because I was trying to
Oh,
fit it in with school.
nice.
And so the fall, we did Aconcagua in November, and then we climbed from probably mid-November until January, when I went back to school. And so the time from September to November when I was at school, and that was when I got really sick. And it was before the double header that we had coming, and so that was really stressful for me. And I couldn't be training, and I'd always known that I had control over how hard it was going to be. Like, it was going to be some level of hard, and I could either have it be hard right now in my training and work really hard then, or I could have it be hard later on the mountain. And that was kind of my choice. And so
Mm.
when I got sick, that was really difficult because it wasn't my choice anymore. And
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't going to be hard now, but it was going to be really hard later. And I knew that. And so that meant that I really had to focus on that mental side before I got there because I knew that physically, yeah, it's going to be difficult, but what's going to push me through that physical barrier is going to be my mindset. And so I worked really hard on that, and then when we got to Aconcagua, the real stressor about that wasn't even actually the physical side, um, because we were doing it in November, which isn't the main season for Aconcagua. The weather was super bad, and the winds were super super high. Um, and so basically every day we were hearing that the summit window wasn't going to work, and that we weren't going to be able to do it. And at that point, I'd been working so hard uh,
Oh, yeah.
to achieve this goal that hearing that I wasn't going to have a chance to even try was really difficult for me. We ended up summiting on our last possible day, and we were the first team to summit that whole year, which was
Oh, wow.
it's a
Uh-huh.
fun stat to say, but there was a lot of stress that went into that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that
Well,
was
yeah, it's
that was one of
incredible.
my
I mean,
most
you're talking about these physical challenges, but then you have these climate challenges. How do you prepare for climate challenges from Connecticut?
Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing I can do about the weather. We were so lucky. In order for the plan to work out for me to be the youngest woman to climb the seven summits, we had to summit each mountain on our first try, which doesn't sound that bad, but it really is. Like, you have weather barriers all the time. And so, our weather, we were really lucky. It worked out every time, but there was a lot of stress that went into it working out every time. But yeah, from Connecticut, there was really nothing I could do. I tried not to get caught up with it. I mean, I have the weather forecast for all the mountains, but I tried not to watch it too much and not to get too caught up in the winds. And so
You can't
I
even
would
practice for the winds, right? I
no,
mean,
I
the
mean, there's really
Stairmaster
nothing you
doesn't
can
have
do.
treacherous winds.
No, it doesn't. It definitely does not. But yeah,
Wow.
the weather is was always something I couldn't control, and that was the main stressor was just the things I couldn't control. I mean, the things I could
Of
control, I
course.
knew that I would be able to not perfect them, but work as hard as I could, and that was all I could do. But especially on Everest, the uncontrollable factors were hard for me.
Yeah. How did you manage recovery?
That's a good question. I mean, for each mountain, it was different. Um, for all the other mountains except Everest, recovery was really nice because I had a period of time I could kind of choose if I wanted to get right back into it. My dad would always want to get right back into it, but I would always want to take at least a week or two, depending on the mountain, off from my training, and then I would recover. But for some of those big mountains, recovery was really difficult. But I would have that few weeks or month, depending on which mountain, and then I would get right back into my training for the next mountain. And so the break was always necessary, but it was always kind of a short period before I went right back to training. Um, but the recovery for Denali was pretty crazy. I mean, after I got off the mountain, it was really nice because every time I did a super hard mountain or a super hard physical challenge, my body would hold up right until the end, and then basically once it was over, like the second it was over, my body would just break down,
Mm.
Mm.
which I really appreciated about my body because um, it allowed me to work really hard. And then once we summited Denali and got all the way back down, we got to you fly off and then you fly to this little airport, and then you have a 2-hour drive to the hotel. And then I remember in that 2-hour drive, I took a nap, and when I woke up, I could barely walk. And
Yeah.
so that was really interesting because just a few hours before, I mean, I was hobbling around because I was in pain, but I wasn't like sore. I had blisters all over my feet, so that was why I was
Oh my
hobbling
gosh.
around, but I could walk and I was okay. But then when I woke up, my like muscles, it felt like I'd gotten shots everywhere in my body, and
Wow.
it was very painful. And we hung out in that hotel for a few days, just lying in our beds because we couldn't move. So that was really interesting. And then actually after Denali, like a few weeks later, we had another short mountain to climb. And so that recovery was stressful for me because I knew I needed to get my body ready for the next one pretty quickly. And I didn't need to train because I was so physically prepared after climbing Denali. It was just that I needed to be able to walk, you know. So
Yeah.
that was a hard turnaround time for that. But yeah, and then there's always certain things that happen in recovery. I mean, normally like the skin peels off my fingers, but it doesn't happen right away. It happens about a month after I get back. I don't know why. I
Oh.
really don't know what it is. My dad, after Everest, his fingernails like have a divot in them because
Yeah.
his fingernails like stopped growing, and
Yeah.
then once he got back down, they started growing again. So they have this weird little divot in them.
Yeah.
There's really weird ways that the recovery and the toll that your body has taken manifests itself. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's so interesting. And when you are on the mountain with that intense fatigue and altitude, does that affect your thinking? And if so, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people saying that like when you get to Everest, sometimes because there's less oxygen, you make really bad decisions. But I think that it's more of if you get hypoxic, then your decision making kind of goes out the window. For me, I could always think fine. I mean, at those super high altitudes on Everest, um, yeah, I mean, I was mainly just super exhausted all the time, but I found that my decision making was fine and really been an issue, but I was also never confronted with something I had to make a big decision about. So,
Hmm. Yeah, that
yeah.
makes sense.
It's just up and down, right? That's it.
Well, it's up and down a few times.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Did you have to deal with any kind of self-doubt or fear or anxiety at any point during your climbs?
So self-doubt, no, because for me, I really had to, because you have to prepare your mind in a lot of different ways. For me, the way that I knew that I would be able to do it is if I convinced myself that I could do it and that there was 100% chance I was going to summit and that I was extremely prepared and that nothing could stop me. Um, and of course, I could have not summited because weather could have come in or there
Mm.
was some obstacle that we couldn't go through. There could have been something that prevented me from summiting. But for me on Everest, I had to just convince myself and I had to be 100% positive that I could do it and that I was going to summit. So, in terms of self-doubt, I didn't have a ton of that just because I knew how prepared I was and I knew how mentally and physically prepared that I was. And
Mhm.
but fear was actually something really interesting for me because I don't normally get scared when I'm mountaineering. I find mountaineering so exciting, so fun. I love it. And so I'd never experienced being scared when climbing before on any of the 7 summits until I got to Everest. Um, and Everest is something so different because on the other 7 summits, you hear about people dying and accidents happening, but Everest is really different because um, there's so many factors and so much on Everest that can go wrong. Um, and so I think the first time that I was ever really scared mountaineering was we went through the icefall 6 times because you do rotations, which is basically to climb Everest, you have to go up and down the mountain a few times before you can actually go all the way up, just to let your body acclimatize. So, we went up the ice wall 3 times and down the ice wall 3 times. But the first time we were doing that. Oh, also, let me explain what an ice fall is. So, basically, the ice fall on Everest is this glacier that's going down this really steep slope, and it's being pinched between these 2 different mountains, and so it's crumbling, and it's falling apart. But
Mm.
at the same time as it's falling apart, it's also moving. So the ice wall moves about 3 to 4 feet every day, which is
Wow.
a lot. And when you're
Yeah.
crossing it, you can feel it moving beneath you, which is a really weird sensation.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so to get through it, it's between base camp and camp one. So you have to go through it. And to do that, you have to cross these big ladders and big crevasses. So there's big cracks in the ice that you cross
Right.
using a ladder. And then you have to navigate up really steep ice slopes. Um, anyway, all of that I always found super fun. And that was something I was looking forward to from the moment I even heard about Everest. I mean, if you remember, I said when I first got
Right.
inspired to do it, it was watching someone cross a ladder in the ice wall. And so it literally was the thing that I was excited for. But then it became time, and I was really nervous, and I didn't really understand, and I was confused because I was like, my heart is racing, and my hands are kind of shaking. And I'm like, that's really
Oh,
weird. And I was very confused because I get scared, in life. I don't know, taking a test or something, but never with mountaineering. And so I just didn't really understand what was happening. And then I realized I was like, oh, this is how I feel like before I'm taking a test or when I'm nervous. And so I was like, that's really weird. And in that moment, I didn't really know what to do because I couldn't call my mom because the thing that I was
yeah.
nervous about the ice fall is the avalanches. So when I was talking about that nervousness about things I couldn't control, that was mainly the avalanches about Everest. And I mean, you hear avalanches while you're sleeping at base camp all night. And
Wow.
so then, you're sleeping there, you hear the avalanches, and then you think, oh, well, that's coming from the direction that I'm supposed to go up tomorrow night. That's kind of
Yeah.
concerning. And so I mean, yeah, you hear avalanches all the time at base camp. And the thing about going through the ice fall is you go through it at night, which added another element of like you can't see where it's coming
Mm.
from. Not the
Wow.
best feeling. And so then I was really nervous and I couldn't call my mom and say, "Hey mom, I'm nervous about getting crushed by an avalanche tonight." I mean, that wasn't something that I was gonna do to my mom. And then again, like I couldn't really talk to my friends because they didn't really know what the ice fall even was, and even if they did, they just wouldn't know how to comfort me. So I made some really amazing friends on the mountain, and I was able to turn to them. And my one of my really good friends up there, he told me this quote that really, really resonated with me, and it's if it wasn't scary, it wouldn't be big enough.
Mm.
And after hearing that quote, I was like, "Whoa, that's that's so true." And so then basically every time I heard an avalanche that night in the ice ball, I would just repeat that quote back to myself and keep going. But yeah, there were huge avalanches, and that was that was scary for me to see this giant avalanche heading towards this like line of people that were my friends.
Yeah.
Um, and that was something I had to navigate with. And then especially on Everest, I
Mm.
mean, it's different because you do really come face to face with death. Especially on the summit night, you see dead people, which is something that is interesting to navigate with, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. It's one thing to hear about it, it's another thing to actually see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what about then resilience? Is there advice you can give to people who want to be a little bit like you, how they can develop some resilience? Because there are these scary moments. You will be facing anxiety, but just like in so many areas in life, you have to continue on or you have to cope with it. You can't just fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that in that moment in the ice fall, I really did have to deal with that because I mean, I heard this huge avalanche behind me, and I was like, well, I can't just stop here and have a breakdown. Like I'm in the middle of the ice fall. I can't just turn around or stop. Had to just keep going. And I think that was really difficult for me, just because, well, it was difficult, but at the same time, it was very simple because it wasn't really a choice. I mean, I had to keep going. But I think that pushing yourself past what you are aware you can do is something that's really important, and it's also really hard. I mean, I was terrified that moment when I heard an avalanche and the ice fall, and I didn't know if it could do it, but I had to keep going because I didn't have a choice. And I did it, and I was able to get through it, and I also did it 3 more other times or 5 more other times. And so I think that it's important to push yourself past what you know you can achieve because you never know, maybe you could achieve more. Um, and
Yeah.
so I think that's really important, but it's hard.
Any close calls or moments where it really tested your resilience to the extreme or your resolve? Or even, I'm thinking about your father who knows that he's there with you, he's experiencing the avalanche with you. How was that for him and for both of you?
Yeah, the first night we went through the ice fall, there were 3 avalanches, which, I'm really glad that happened the first time I went through it because then I didn't know that that wasn't normal, so that was really helpful for me, but that night, the avalanche got so close to some of my friends that they could feel the dust on their faces,
Oh,
which is pretty terrifying, yeah, so I think that it was definitely hard for my dad, and he had kind of an extra element that I didn't have to deal with. Um, and in terms of the avalanches, the thing that scared me wasn't like if there was going to be an avalanche, because there most certainly was going to be an avalanche. It was just kind of our proximity to it. Um, and so, I mean, that was weird for me to think is something could kill me, and it's completely out of my control. I mean, I really can't do anything about it. And the
mm,
things I could do about it, I was already doing. So you go at night because the ice is colder, which,
oh,
yeah, and
uh-huh.
then the icefall doctors find a specific route through the icefall that's the safest each year. And so, yeah, and I mean, I think that for my dad, of course, it added an extra thing, but we both knew, I mean, we found the best guides. My guide was amazing. He's summited Everest 18 times now.
Wow,
So
wow.
he really is just an all-star. Um, so that was something that helped me is that I can only control what I can control, and that's it.
Right. And outside of those kind of acutely just very, very dangerous moments, there's also that monotonous aspect. So, how do you keep focus during those long stretches of just doing the same?
Yeah, I mean, that's really important on the summit nights, especially. On our summit night for Everest, we left at 9 p.m. and we summited at 5:44 a.m. And then I don't even know what time we got back down because at that point I was so tired I went right to sleep. So the being able to control your mind for that long is super important. Um, on the summit nights, I mean, by the end, I learned how to kind of get myself into this. this state. I mean, some people call it like a flow state, but for me, it would be this rhythm of where when you step, when you breathe, and you get into this rhythm. And it was a little bit like zoning out, but not too much that I was unaware of what was happening. So it was kind of the perfect amount of letting my mind wander while my feet were doing the right thing. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah.
and then sometimes I would come up with like topics for myself to think about while I was up there. But I mean, half the time I'm thinking about where to put my feet and how it's really hard. And then the other half of the time, um, something that really helps me on summit nights is I think about what I'm going to tell my friends and
Mm.
getting to text my friend, like, I just summited Everest. I think about that a lot when I'm on summit
Yeah.
nights, and I think about
Yeah. That makes sense.
um, yeah, and I think about all my different friends. I think about telling my family, and I think about what I'm gonna do on the summit. So I think about that a lot just to distract myself, and it's also something that I, for some reason, was able to think about the same exact thing for like a really long time with the same people. I mean, I really thought mostly about telling my mom and then telling my best friend.
Mm.
And a really fun fact that I didn't even know until afterwards was that when we reached the summit, my guide radioed down to base camp, and then the head of our guiding company called my mom and told her that we summited while we were on the summit. And so
Oh,
that
wow.
was really cool because she knew that we were on the top of the world when we
Yeah.
were actually
Oh,
there,
cool.
which is so cool and it was so fun. I definitely
And I
couldn't have
think you
planned
had
that
said
any.
your like tracking device had frozen over, right?
Yeah, so that was something that was fun that I got to do for my friends and family, which was fun, is that I had a tracker on my backpack, and so they could tell when we were leaving and where we were, even if we didn't have service. And what I didn't think about was that Everest is the tallest mountain in the world. It's very cold, and the tracker will probably freeze.
Right.
And we had it inside our backpacks and like wrapped up and stuff, but still froze. And what I didn't think about is when it freezes, it turns off. And so, thankfully, my mom had thought about that, and
Oh
she
my gosh.
knew
Yeah.
that if it turned off, that that meant that it died, or for some reason we had to leave it somewhere, or it didn't mean anything about where we were, because if we had turned back, it would show us going back.
Mm.
But if it
Yeah.
just stopped, that meant that there's something wrong with the tracker. And
Yeah.
so, thankfully, she had told, well, she knew, and then she had told my friends that that might happen.
Mm.
I remember getting back down, realizing that the tracker was off, and thinking, "Oh God, my mom probably thinks I'm dead."
Yeah.
But she didn't. She's a very smart lady, so she
Yeah.
already knew. But yeah, that was a fun thing. And we originally actually only had one tracker for because my dad had it, because it's actually a Garmin InReach, which you can text from even if you don't have service.
Oh,
Um, yeah, it's like an emergency device, which is really nice. And so he had that, and then we were on Denali, and my dad's good friend texted my mom and said, "Well, where is Emma's tracker?" And she said, "Oh, well, she'll be with Sam, so she doesn't need a separate tracker." And then he said, "Well, how do you know she's with Sam?" And that sent my mom down a spiral, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
I think our Denali summit was the most stressful summit for her. But she was like very concerned, because
Yeah.
then she started, I mean, I learned about this because my brother was with her, and he told me, like, then she starts pulling up her Google Maps and with our
Mm.
location, and then she points out to him like, "Joshua, that looks like a crevasse, like what if they fell in a crevasse?" And my brother goes, "Mom, that's a bridge of a mountain, like you can't see a
Mhm.
crevasse
Mhm.
on
Yeah.
Google Maps."
Mhm.
And so yeah, I mean, it was definitely hard for her to be at home, but
Sure. Yeah.
by the time we got to Everest, she really got the hang of it. So,
I
Yeah.
guess so.
yeah.
And she hasn't started desiring to climb with you?
Oh no, she did base camp with us, but that was kind of the highest she would go.
Yeah. Well, so you have had people in your corner in so many different capacities, right? The friend that
Yeah,
went running with you, obviously your mother and other friends and your father who climbs with you. And then, of course, the whole teams that you would climb with. How crucial is the role of your climbing team in your journey?
So crucial. I mean, mountaineering's not a team sport. It's very much an individual. Well, I wouldn't call it an individual thing. It depends on the mountain. Denali was a very individual, solo kind of trip. But Everest relies on so many different groups of people. I mean, Everest is really an operation, and I mean, you have people who are setting the lines. You have people who are
Yeah.
like setting the route through the ice ball even before you get there. And then you have people who are helping carry your stuff, and you have cook tents, and so it really is a whole operation up there. But in terms of like my climbing group and the people I climbed aside, to me was so important because Everest especially it's 2 months long, so it's a really long time to be in
Yeah.
a not very comforting environment. I mean,
No
half the
Netflix, huh?
time, well, actually, I was able to download some stuff, but I mean, mostly no, because I had to save my phone battery. So,
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
um, yeah, so especially at those higher camps, I mean, the thing about being at altitude that I had never experienced until Everest is, well, normally when you're at altitude, each night I expect to feel better. And I know that I just got to altitude, so tomorrow night I will sleep better because I will climatize more. And the first time I experienced the opposite was at Camp 2 on Everest, which is, I think, around 23,000 feet. Um,
Mm.
and so at that point, I each night I started feeling worse, and I was like,
Mm,
"Well, that's really weird. Like, that's never happened to me before." I realized it was because like you're not to be dramatic, but you are dying,
Yeah.
and so your body's just going downhill every night, and you're dying very slowly, but you know you're dying. um, and so
Yeah.
that was something that was really interesting for me to experience. But in terms of those groups, in those kinds of environments, it's so important because you create this kind of community and you're up there for 2 months. And so you learn to rely on each other and support each other and also just laugh together. I mean, it's hard and it's really brutal, but having fun is really important.
yeah.
My team on Everest found out that we love playing Uno, and so we would play Uno all the time. I was definitely a leader in that because I love playing cards, and it's a great thing to do on a mountain because it has doesn't have to do with your phone or using your battery, and
Right.
so um, lots of Uno games. My team actually became the highest Uno game ever, which was really fun. And so um we had so much fun with that and just like the support in there. I mean, I told you like my friend gave me that quote that I repeated in my head throughout the ice ball. It was just so important. It was also like we became really close at the start, and then our group would split up a bit. I mean, the people who were not more prepared but more ready and acclimatizing better would go up the mountain sooner, and then other people would go back later. And so you'd be able to text your friends at different points on the mountain and hear about where they were, and hear about the conditions up there or down there. And so that was
Right.
really yeah.
Yeah. What did you learn about leadership from this experience?
A lot. I mean, my guide, who was just such a leader, was amazing. I mean, every time I was scared in the ice ball, I'd look at him and, look to see if I look to see if I should be scared from him. And I remember every time I was like, well, I can't tell anything from him. I mean, he's just like a stoic kind of guy. And especially because when we were in the ice fall, when you go down the ice fall, you go really early in the morning, but it is light. And so he would sometimes stop and we would sit there for like maybe 2 or 3 minutes and he would just be staring up at some giant ice block. Then he would turn and tell us, looks good. And at the beginning, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's great. It looks good." And then I realized by the end, there is no way that he is looking up at this giant ice block that crumbles a bit every night and says, "Yeah, it's really safe." And I was like, so I realized that by the end that he was playing a big part in me feeling safe, even if it wasn't safe. And I realized, the ice fall isn't safe at all. And so there was no way that he was looking at that and thinking by the end, yeah, looks really good. So I learned about a lot about leadership from him, and just knowing when to be truthful and when to be honest and when to encourage people a bit. And
Mm.
so I mean, he was such a motivational person too. The weather would be horrible, and he would come into our tent with a super big smile and be like, "The weather is gonna clear up. I am very confident. Like, we're gonna do so well." And I'd be like, "Yeah, that sounds great. We are." So he played such a big role in my dad and I having the motivation that we did. And I've had experiences with guides who aren't like that and are a little more very truthful, and I prefer someone who's glazing the truth a bit.
Right, right. And
Dose of optimism.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And how do you mentally transition from achieving one big goal to then preparing for the next one?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I really liked about doing the Sutton Summits was, um, well, there wasn't always another one, but most of the time, except for the last time, there
Right.
was another one to do. Um, and it was something I had to learn because when I did Denali, I remember some people say that Denali is harder than Everest is just because of the physical aspect of Denali. And so I remember thinking, oh, well, I just did Denali. Everything else is going to be easy from now on. That was a lesson that I had to learn that just because something is hard doesn't make everything else easy. It just means that you can do it. And so that was a good lesson for me to learn because then I showed up at Aconcagua and I was like, why is this not easy? I just did Denali. Um, and I realized of course it's really hard also. It's just um yeah. So that was something I had to learn. But always going to the next one was really nice because they were also different from each other. And so it was nice to have a different goal each time.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that makes sense. And throughout this journey, you've touched on a variety of different mental skills that you've used. So, if you had to pick one mental skill that you think every young athlete should practice, what would that be?
Um that's a good question. I think the positive self-talk and just the belief in yourself as a tool is really helpful. I think that if I had given myself the opportunity to have doubt in myself, that would have been really difficult for me. So my strategy was just to not have that at all and just to tell myself that there was 100% chance that I was going to do it because I was prepared and I was ready. And I
Mhm.
think that if I had let that opportunity come in of self doubt, that would have been so much more difficult for me.
Right.
Um, and so I think that was a really great strategy that I used was um, just positive belief in myself.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
And you did all these 7 summits in 18 months?
Yes, 17 or 18, not
Yeah.
sure, but something like that.
How did do you feel like you changed during that time mentally, emotionally, physically?
I mean, I think it would be crazy if I didn't change through this whole thing. I've learned so much uh, just about doing hard things and how to do hard things and how to navigate through being scared. And I mean, I could just list things forever that I learned from this whole experience. And it changed so much about how I view the world and how I view obstacles. Um, hard things don't seem, I wouldn't say they seem easy anymore, but they don't seem impossible after doing this.
Mhm.
Kind of gives you a perspective.
Yeah, it definitely does. I remember someone told me they were like they asked me actually, "How do you have a stressful day at school after climbing Everest?" I said, "Well, I don't know, but I definitely still could have a stressful day. I
Yeah.
just
I
know how
guess
to
so.
deal with it now."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And has the journey somehow shaped your approach to challenges off the mountain as you're referencing in school? Like, do you approach those challenges, those pressures, the internal pressure? Do you now approach it somehow differently?
Yeah, I would say so. I think the main thing is just that I know how I react to pressure and I know how I respond to that, which is really helpful because I know what is good for me and what is too much for me, which um, normally there isn't ever too much, but I know how I work under pressure and how to help myself work under pressure. I mean, the big thing that I have coming up is so I'm a senior. I'm going to be a senior in high school this year, and so I'm applying to colleges. And I remember thinking about college after I did Everest and thinking, well, you know, it's still just as hard as it was before, but it for some
Right.
reason doesn't seem as daunting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what messages do you hope to share with young girls or aspiring climbers?
Yeah, I think that especially with young girls, I hope to show them that you really can do anything if you believe in yourself and you work hard. And I think that those two things together are really important. I mean, I believed in myself from the beginning, and when I set this goal, I was fairly confident that I was going to achieve it, no matter what happened. And like I said, I mean, there could have been obstacles, but for me, I had to be in that mindset. So I think believing in yourself is really important, but believing in yourself without that hard work doesn't mean that much. And so
Mm.
um, the hard work is so important. And that was one of my favorite things about mountaineering is that every time I worked really hard, I have a nice reward for my hard work, and it was a
Yeah.
very nice direct relationship between working hard and results. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I really think that belief in yourself and confidence is gonna take everyone really crazy places.
Yeah. Well, what's your next Everest, Emma?
Oh, that's a good question. I have some big goals. I have some exciting things that I want to do. I'm thinking about doing a gap year between high school and college and doing some more climbing in that. But my big goal, I'm waiting to share yet.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
okay. Very
Yeah,
exciting.
trying to keep the pressure just to myself. So
Yeah.
Well, fair enough. Outside pressure can be devastating, that's for
yeah.
sure.
I mean, I had really great role models in my parents, but there were really not that many women, especially young women in mountaineering that I could look up to. Um, but I did find a few who had my records before I got them, and I drew so much inspiration just from hearing their stories. And the girl who had there was a girl, Lucy Westlake, and she had the youngest American woman to climb Everest before I did, and she inspired me so much. And she had blogs actually of videos of her climbing Denali when she was younger,
Mhm.
and I binge watched the whole thing of her climbing Denali before I went, and it helped me so much. I mean, Denali was the mountain I stressed out about the most because it was the biggest jump for me.
Yeah.
Um,
That
and
makes sense.
so seeing just a girl who was like me, just a girl who was I think at the time she was younger than me, I think. I think she was 15 when she did it. And so watching her, just a normal person, and then somebody, and that was for me so inspirational. And
Mhm.
I mean, it was just her being a real person, but it showed me that I'm a real person and I could also do it. And so I hope to inspire others the way that I have been inspired.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing point because the reality is that everybody who's achieved something great actually is just a real normal person,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
has kind of made up their mind to pursue something and they try and they try and they try. There probably are missteps and failures along the way. I mean, it's to be
Yeah.
guaranteed one way or another. But they just don't give up. And that's really the big differentiator.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember, people say, or even in my introduction, amazing athlete. And I remember thinking whenever someone says that, I'm sure, I mean, I guess so, but I don't feel that way. I mean, objectively you could say that, but whenever people say that, I get confused because I'm like, well, I guess I am, but I I think it's funny because um I'm sure it's true with celebrities, like, they are just regular people, and they have
Yeah,
just worked really hard, and I
yeah,
think that that's something that we should be admiring, just the hard work to get places that people do.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Emma, thank
Absolutely.
you so much for sharing your time with us today. I have really enjoyed this conversation, getting to hear all of your insights, and yeah, we really really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
having me, yeah, this was a great
and
conversation.
we'll definitely be curious about your next journey. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
Thanks again.